The bright side of addiction is recovery. I'm Neil Scott. We're going to meet Rob Lohman in this edition of Recovery Coast to Coast. He's a man in long-term recovery who recovers out loud. He's been in recovery for 21 years, following many years of drinking, even suicide ideology. He's also in recovery from gambling addiction. And at one point, even when he was in recovery, he was facing up to 56 years in prison. Now, he served about a year in prison and nearly another year in a halfway house. He's very grateful. His road into long-term recovery is paved with faith and gratitude. And later on in the podcast, we're going to hear from legendary actor Dick Van Dyke. He will share some thoughts on living from miracle to miracle. I'm Neil Scott, host of Recovery Coast to Coast. Following 15 years of nightly broadcasting on iHeartRadio in Seattle, we've now upgraded to a national podcast available to anyone at any time, featuring interviews with clinicians, authors, recovering celebrities, and everyday people in long-term recovery. Plus, well-vetted resources for individuals, families, and friends. We invite you to enjoy it and to share it with your friends. Recovery is an American way of life. Our website is recoverycoasttocoast.org. And by the way, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a note at recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Let us know where you listen from and your thoughts about our podcast. And perhaps you have a guest that you'd like to suggest. Again, our website is recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Recovery Coast to Coast, supported by the good folks at Sundown M Ranch, one of the oldest and most successful treatment programs and most affordable programs in the addiction treatment area. They have a legacy of recovery. They've successfully treated well over 200,000 adolescents, adults, and families for the past 50-plus years. It really is where recovery becomes a reality. If you're in recovery and someone you know, maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend, they ask you to recommend a treatment program. How do you react? What do you suggest? You know, I just did a Google search a while back, and it indicated there are close to 30,000 residential treatment programs in America, and that number is growing. Many of them are solid, patient-centered, ethical treatment programs that really put the patient first. Many, unfortunately, are not. Some prey on the desperation of family members who don't know what to do or where to turn. At Sundown M Ranch, they continue to put the patient first. And they have since back in 1968, well over 50 years. First of all, they have an amazing staff that's been together as a care team for a long time with very little staff turnover. Secondly, they have a nonprofit organization that owns the 30-acre facility in central Washington state. It's beautiful, by the way, right at the mouth of the Yakima River Canyon. As a result, their rates for treatment, well, they're among the lowest in the country. And third, they don't just treat and release. They have a rock-solid continuing care program, which also integrates the patient into the community that they came from following the inpatient treatment. They accept most major insurance programs, and if you don't have insurance, they will work with families to arrange financing. Check them out. Go to the website and kind of become familiar with it. I think you might enjoy some of the things that they have there. The website is sundown.org. It's where recovery begins. Give them a call. Their first responders are warm. They're compassionate. They're very helpful. 1-800-326-7444 or shoot them an email at info@sundown.org. Now let's meet Rob Lohman. I met Rob in Denver. We had a chance to discuss the bright side of addiction. Let's listen. We are here in Denver, Colorado at the NAATP conference. We're broadcasting from the 42nd Annual Leadership Conference of NAATP. That's the National Association of Addiction Treatment Providers. A searching and fearless inventory. That's the theme of this particular conference here in the mile-high city of Denver, Colorado. Our visit made possible by Sundown M Ranch, where recovery becomes reality. Love coming down here. Love meeting new friends, seeing old friends, and running into people who do other podcasts. Carrying the message. We all need to carry the message in whatever form we can. Podcasting is a great way to do it. And there are a number of people down here who are doing podcasts, including our guest in this segment, Rob Lohman. I ran into Rob, I guess it was yesterday. All the days seem to be rolling together here. And he told me about his podcast and what he does. He does interventions. His website is liftedfromtherut.com. And Rob is a person in long term recovery. Rob, welcome to Recovery Coast to Coast.
Thank you very much. So glad to be here.
Where do you live?
Littleton, Colorado, just outside of Denver.
Oh, okay. So you don't have far to go.
No, it was a 20-minute commute, which is pretty nice. So.
Nice, very nice. Tell me a little bit about Rob and tell me your history and back when it wasn't so good.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I did find sobriety 21 years ago, so it's been
a newcomer.
I guess I'm legally allowed to not drink in recovery. Right, I'm 21 years old. So
nice.
But yeah, it's been an amazing journey, and it was just a long season of just being lost and trying to find myself from age 14 to 29, and it was just, I mean, a lot of the stories, you hear a lot of the stories, but it was just the chaotic roller coaster of trying to find myself, and I found myself in a gutter, I found myself in jail, I found myself passed out on the floor, passed out in my car, and I was just lost for such a long time.
So the progression really took off.
Yeah, it did. I mean, because I grew up in a good Christian home, and that was kind of the values I was given. But alcohol was just the allure of it. No big consequences in our family. It was just people drank. It was socially acceptable.
What were the events surrounding your first drink?
Oh wow, my first drunk was I was hanging out at actually a Christian youth event, and this guy came and he said, "Hey Lohman, I got a 6-pack of beer. You want to go grab a beer with these 2 girls?" And I'm thinking, 2 girls, a 6-pack of beer. I'm 14.
Wow.
Why not? Right? So.
Wow. Yeah. And you were off to the races.
It was. I mean, I was the guy that went ka-ch, 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 and just slammed those 3
right
beers.
From the beginning.
Yeah, it had me at hello.
What did it do for you?
It gave me confidence. Like I was kind of like the goofy kid, but it I don't know, made me feel stronger, more confident, and just kind of overcome anxiety, which I never knew until I was interviewed on a podcast like years ago. My life was riddled with anxiety.
Really?
Yeah.
And the alcohol helped that.
It totally
At least
helped
initially
it
did,
yeah.
Certainly. And what about your friends growing up past the age of 14? You probably hung with the guys who were drinking, right?
It's funny. A lot of because people think like, oh, in the Christian world, you're gonna do what you're taught, right, and what you're shown. Right. But oddly enough, a lot of us, we drank on the Young Life ski trips. That's just kind of stuff that we did because that's what you do, right? You find a group that does what you do, so you keep doing what you've been doing.
When did it start getting difficult? When did the problems with alcohol begin for you, Rob?
High school. I mean, it was, but here's the thing. I always got out of it. So the problems were there, but I was a smooth talker, so I manipulated the situation.
You got the free pass.
Yeah, so I never had like the serious consequences. But internally, over time, I was dying. Outside, you couldn't tell, but I was just dying inside. But yeah, so I mean, I just didn't. The consequences never hit me until later.
And what was later?
What was later? Well, later was losing jobs. Because that and really later I'm just gonna. I mean, again, we know the drunkalogs, and that's just not really important now. But what was happening towards the end of my drinking was suicide ideation was kicking up a lot. So I would literally live in Fort Wayne, Indiana, working in real estate. I'd be driving down the highway, and I would literally see my car veer off and hit a median. But the unique thing was I would see myself actually dead. In that vision, and that was just happening more and more and more and more, and I was hating myself. I was self-loathing. I mean, I was self-harming. It was just a disgusting internal battle.
Were there friends or perhaps family that would say, Rob, I'm concerned about you. You need to do something about your drinking?
Not really. It was more
you hit it well.
Yeah, my mom was concerned because I wasn't operating at full capacity, but my friends, I mean, we were all wild, so it was just kind of like you hung out with the more wild guy and you didn't look as bad. It's so that was kind of it. It was just, but a lot of my friends didn't have a lot of consequences either. It was just like, I don't know what was going on, but we were just wild, crazy, real estate, having fun guys.
When did it all end for you, and when did it all begin for you?
Yeah, definitely the same night, same moment. It was June 7th, 2001. I was hanging out in a bar in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I drank and drove 8 nights a week. Like I was out all the time in music and bands, But I was hanging out at this bar, and all of a sudden, like the bar, the music, the voices, everything got dead silent, like that, which is not good for a show, right? You're like, oh, there's dead air, but there was dead air in the establishment, and all of a sudden, I audibly heard the words, "You're done," and then everything got back to normal. And I looked at my buddy Sean, and I'm looking around the bar, and I go, man, Sean, I got to go home. I think I'm finally done drinking. And
you heard a voice.
Yeah, I heard "You're done," and then Sean laughed at me. He goes, "Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow, whatever." But I drove home, and I felt like two different people driving home. I felt like a guy who just sobered up, and I feel like a guy that was totally intoxicated. And I'm driving home with this conflict. And the next thing I knew, I'd walked up 12 stairs to my little 1 bedroom loft apartment, and had 350 pounds on a barbell. And as I lifted the barbell off the rack, I dropped it to crush my chest and commit suicide and take myself out of the game that night. Time stopped that night because what happened, because I couldn't lift that much weight. And I would say God can carry the weight of the world. And so that night,
I guess he did that night.
He did that night.
Holy
I mean, things
smokes.
paused, and the next thing that happened was, I believe, God just kind of gave my dog Jake a nudge, and was like, "Go save your dad." And so next thing I knew, my dog was nudging my knee, kind of looking at me, just like, "Dad, what the heck are you doing?" And my heart broke for him. I'm like, who the heck's going to feed you tomorrow morning? And then I started thinking about the good things in my life. And the next thing I knew, God put the barbell back on the rack and poured out all my alcohol that night, because I could drink 2 bottles of scotch in a day, just like social, a sales guy, right?
Of course.
But the next day I made the phone call. Meant to call my Aunt Carol, who'd been sober 24 years, but I accidentally called my parents. And that was the answered prayer my mom had prayed for years, was, thank God Rob's like ready to change his life. And next thing I knew, I was hanging out in the back of a bar at an AA meeting, and guys were doing what we're doing now, is just laughing and cutting it up. And I'm like, okay, last night I tried to kill myself. These guys and gals were happy, joyous, and free, and they really were, in the back of a bar in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Not a glum lot.
Not at all, man. And I just jumped into recovery. I mean, I did what they told me. I remember my sponsor asked me, he goes, "Rob, what's one thing that makes you happy?" And I said, "Milkshakes." He goes, "All right, I want you at 12 o'clock every day, go get a milkshake." So I did. And he's like, "I want you to do this." And so I just did what he told me to, because I did not want to drink. But I'll tell you this, for a guy that drank as much as I did, I never went through detox or withdrawal. I haven't had a craving in almost 21 years. And I can only give that credit to God and his divine intervention.
What was the first year like? Because everything was different.
Yeah. I had to learn how to play golf sober, go on a date sober, go to a movie theater without sneaking alcohol into a movie. I had to learn how to do everything, sober. But the thing was, I just poured into community. Like, I was part of community. And so played softball, did all that stuff, and I was on that pink cloud lasted for a while.
So you stuck with the winners.
Yeah, yes. I mean, getting sober was easy, just because of the depths I had gone to right the night before. But just believing what people were doing, it was easy for me to stay sober.
And so you walk that walk, and you've been doing this for the last 21 years. June 7th, 2001. What are your thoughts each June 7th?
Man, it's amazing. So I'm grateful every single year that my recovery continues to progress a year.
Sure.
But I want to say this, encourage your listeners, because just getting sober is the easy part. How do you do life on life term?
Right.
It's hard. And so later on in my life,
because stuff happened.
Yeah, like I got married, had kids, owned a business, but I was very emotionally immature, and those pressures I was unable to handle. So I actually had a major nervous breakdown in 11 years into recovery, which ended up sending me to prison during my. So I went to prison in recovery instead of when I was out using and abusing drugs.
That's different.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, it was horrible. I had an unchecked gambling addiction that had continued. I never understood gambling and how it affected the brain and the pleasure center and dopamine and all that stuff. And so for me, I was dealing with suicide ideation again, because I had failed. Right? I was listening to the evil forces in life. Right?
Yeah.
It was like, you suck, you failed, you're not a good husband, a father. Like, look at your debt and business losses and stuff. So February 2012 was when I had my emotional, mental breakdown, and it was just an awful night, and it just led to a lot of collateral damage.
How long were you in prison?
So I was supposed to be in prison so when I went to my sentencing, again, there's a lot of details, I mean, you can't get into all of it on the show, but when the incident happened, I confessed a couple months later to authorities, and then 6 months later after that, I got arrested with 19 felonies and 13 misdemeanors. But here's
you were
the
a
thing.
busy guy.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Like after the incident, which it was a mental breakdown, I ended up lighting some boxes on fire in a blackout, mental blackout, and I just couldn't stop it. So my charges were arson, and thank God nobody got hurt in the process. You know, my wife had to go through her own journey. Do I stay with the nutball? Is he psycho? Who is he? And she just realized it was the guy that got off track, and thank God for that, right? And so my kids were 2 and 4 at that time, and then I got sentenced in July 2013. It was anywhere from two years of work release to 56 years in prison. That's what I was facing. But see, I turned it all over to God, and I trusted God with the outcome. I had to, because it was out of my control. So, what I ended up receiving was for the two charges a 13-year prison sentence in 2013, and I was only incarcerated for 10 and a half months, thanks to the glory of God, and 11 months in a halfway house, and just started to rebuild my life after that, having felonies on my record, overcoming all those, but never really understanding. And no psychiatrist, no therapist, no one asked me, do you have a gambling problem? And that is the crux of my demise, was process addictions, not the substance abuse.
And when you were in prison, did you go to meetings?
Oh, yeah, it was cool. I mean, literally, my wife was jealous of me being there because she was home being a single mom, trying to do life. How do you pay bills? But our Christian community really surrounded her. And so when I was incarcerated, I mean, it was like I went to seminary. I mean, I read, I studied, I tried to figure out, why do I believe my faith? Is it true? Is it real? So I read the Bible from front to back. I read, 42 books when I was gone, took all these life learning classes, but I consistently went to AA meetings in prison. And we were just cutting up, and it was just common. Now, a lot of guys were they just wanted to get out of their cell, just to go to a meeting and hang out. But they're still absorbing what's being said, right? So a lot of amazing conversations around addictions, and I just love helping people now with what I get to do now. As a result of all that other stuff that happened, has a purpose.
How did you get into professionally helping people?
So while I was living in the halfway house, I would, as I was getting ready to get released from the halfway house, okay, now it's time to start looking for a big boy job, right? Because
put your big boy pants on, Rob.
I was waiting tables, doing the easy thing, but I was like, okay, now it's time to start looking at the future. So I'd interview for all these jobs, and they're like, hey, we really love you, love what you do, and your passion. We'd love to hire you. Let's do the background check. I was like, all right. I was like, before you do that, let me tell you what you're gonna find, and I would just tell them a 2-3 minute version of what they're gonna find. And they're like, all right, hey, are you done with that kind of behavior? I'm like, yeah, arsonist is part of my past. And but I didn't get any of them. So with felonies, I was like, what do I do? Well, what do? We start jobs. We start our own businesses. So a friend of mine said, hey, you should get trained to become an interventionist and a recovery coach, because good and bad recovery. So literally in December of 2015, I was trained to do what I do now. And then January 1st, I launched my Lifted from the Rut business, and I've just been at it since then for the last 6 years.
A lot of gratitude in your life today.
Yeah.
I can see it in your eyes. Yeah. I can see it in your eyes.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Tell me, Rob, in addition to the intervention work that you do, tell me about your podcast.
Yeah, so it was really cool. So I hosted this big addiction awareness event, right? And then I invited the Mental Health News Radio Network to come to kind of interview all the guests and speakers and stuff. And then a little while after that, I really wanted to do a podcast show. People are like, hey, you have a voice for radio. And,
people say I have a face for radio.
Yeah, I wanted to say face, but I'm just going to go with voice. But it was cool. And then she said, Rob, just join our network. And I thought, really? Cool. So I did. So I came up with Beyond the Bars Radio as my first one.
I love it. I told you yesterday, I love Beyond the Bars. That could be one of three things.
Yeah.
It could be for attorneys, it could be for people going to jail, and it could be for the bars that you knew so well back in your active addiction.
Yeah, and it's been cool. I was featured in Podcast Magazine November last year at a 6-page spread on my story and the podcast and what I get to do. And I love podcasting. And part of it was, when you hear Beyond the Bars Radio, it's like, what is that? Right? And I came up with a second one I do called Addiction, Freedom, and Faith, because I really want people to understand, like how does addiction keep us back from our freedom? And whatever your faith is, how does that define your future? And I think all three of those work well together. So that one really stands out to say, hey, this is about faith, this is about addiction and freedom. And so I have both of them going now, and and actively, posting podcasts, and I just love people's stories like you.
Yeah.
And it's just, but when I work with clients and families, I'll say, hey, you really need to go listen to this guy's podcast about, he was the guy living in the basement. His parents finally kicked out. And it's like, just listen to it. Now he's a therapist and does amazing things. So I'll use those as tools for helping my clients as well.
And give the address of the two podcasts, if you would.
Yep. So beyondthebarsradio.com and addictionfreedomandfaith.com.
How's your faith today, Rob?
It is the core of what I do. I mean, it defines. The thing I realize is that if I don't understand who I am and define who I am through my faith, or let my faith define me, then guess what? Everyone around here is going to define me somehow. And what I realize is that these are the truths over here that my faith says about me, and anything that comes against that or contradicts that, I just poo-poo it away and say that's not true about me.
Yeah.
Because I still deal with, it's been 6 months since I've dealt with suicide ideation. Like, it's gone, but it continued to stay. But it was longer periods it would happen, and now just through tons of prayer and work and discipleship and stuff. I mean, I don't deal with that negative thought anymore.
And you're connected. You're connected to the community. You're connected to family. You're connected to Rob.
Yeah, totally.
And I was at a meeting this morning, and the guy said, the opposite of addiction is connection.
Totally.
And I mean, that is so true. And the more connected you are, the healthier you are, and the more you can help others. Because if you're not well connected, you can't help anyone else.
Amen to that.
Absolutely. The other website that you have for your intervention work is liftedfromtherut.com.
Yes, sir.
How do you find clients for that?
I do a lot of networking through the faith community, so churches, pastors.
Nice.
Treatment centers refer to me a lot, past clients. And it's just it comes from all sorts of avenues, and I just leave it up to kind of like my faith to bring them. But I do a lot of social media work and podcasting and Facebook Live stuff, so just attracting clients that way.
I always say the bright side of addiction is recovery, and you are recovery.
Thanks, man. I love what you're doing, and God bless you.
Thank you, Rob. What a great guy, and what a miracle his recovery is. Now, speaking of great guys and miracles, legendary actor Dick Van Dyke has some thoughts on living from miracle to miracle. We'll hear from him in just 30 seconds.
Are you afraid? Afraid of life without drugs and alcohol? There is help and hope at Sundown M Ranch. At Sundown, the focus is on you and your disease. You will learn how to live without depending on drugs and alcohol. Sundown M Ranch is nationally recognized for effective and affordable alcohol and drug treatment programs. Reclaim your life. Replace your fears with hope. Go to www.sundown.org right now to learn more.
And now, as promised, here is Dick Van Dyke with some thoughts on miracles.
To be alive, to be able to see, to walk, to have houses, music, paintings, it's all a miracle. I have adopted the technique of living life from miracle to miracle. Arthur Rubinstein. There was a time in my life when I would scoff at the very idea of miracles. Which is not to say that on certain occasions I didn't hope desperately that something miraculous would come to pass. If I could get rid of my hangover by taking a few drinks without getting drunk all over again, that would have been a miracle. If I could only get bailed out, get to the airport on time, make my deadline, that would be a miracle. Out of the true miracle of my sobriety today flows a host of other miracles. I am the same person I was back then, to be sure, but I feel far differently about myself. My self-loathing has been replaced with a sense of self-respect and usefulness. There are days when I am literally astonished to be alive. When I think back to the constantly perilous existence I led and to the times I was close to death, I am filled with gratitude just to be breathing, let alone to have physical and mental capabilities. Today, I am aware that all of this has come to pass only because of the power and grace of God. That awareness for me is perhaps the greatest miracle of all. Thought for today: expect a miracle, accept a miracle.
Well, that wraps up this edition of the national podcast, Recovery Coast to Coast. If you've enjoyed the podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Our website is recoverycoasttocoast.org. And there you'll find all of the previous podcasts there as well. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would hit the subscribe or follow button. It's totally free. And remember, if you know someone who is experiencing problems with alcohol or any other drug, there is a 24-hour helpline that's available. It offers free information and confidential treatment referrals. Spanish-speaking individuals are available as well. The number is 1-800-622-HELP. And another shout-out to our sponsoring organization, Sundown M Ranch, successfully treating individuals, including adults, adolescents, and their families for well over 50 years. Sundown.org. Join us next time for America's Voice for Recovery, Recovery Coast to Coast, the national podcast. I'm Neil Scott, reminding you to stay healthy, live in gratitude, and be kind to others. Remember, the bright side of addiction is recovery. Pass it on.